Hi, my name is Rob Scott from UC Today News, and in this session, I'm joined by data protection expert Dr. Scott Allendevaux, who's going to guide us through today's topic, which focuses on service providers and why they need a data protection program in today's UC marketplace. So welcome, Scott. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Just before we dive in, Scott, how about we just do a quick introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Allendevaux and Company.
Sure, happy to do that. So I'm a data protection specialist. I work at a full service data protection firm. I've worked in the UC industry for over 20 years. The partners of the firm have. A quick bio, we have a legal department staffed with full-time attorneys to help with data protection laws and regulations. We have a full-service cybersecurity department, a full-service business continuity department to help organizations with their disaster recovery planning, including ISO 22301. We have a full-service risk management department that conducts risks assessments, and we have an internal audit department that provides third-party attestations. So that's a quick overview about who we are and a quick overview of Allendevaux and Company.
Fantastic. Well, let's find out why all those teams matter in today's conversation about data protection programs and why they matter to UC providers and specifically, I suppose, service providers providing these services. So, I mean, first of all, I mean, the UC industry is processing more data than ever, I can imagine. So, and I imagine that's hugely complex for service providers to navigate. So I suppose, my first question, Scott, is, what exactly is a data protection program and why is it vital?
Sure. Well, let's talk about this. Leading into that, unlike ever before, UC platforms and service providers, they allow organizations to communicate and collaborate and share highly sensitive information. But with the growth of that particular industry has also grown the attack surface for bad actors to be able to target pharmaceuticals, discussing the latest R&D development amongst researchers, very, very highly confidential information. Businesses exchange chat messages about their strategies. NATO talks about their security measures concerning the war in the Ukraine. So one of the most important steps that UC companies can take to protect this evolving class of highly sensitive information is to implement and to maintain a comprehensive data protection program. And it starts by ensuring UC companies understand the laws and the regulations that they have to follow, such as the GDPR, such as the CCPA. So it includes policies and procedures that whole companies have to follow in terms of how to handle data, when to perform vulnerability scans and penetration tests, what it means to include principles such as security by design or privacy by design and default, when to document privacy impact assessments, and so on. So I think it's worth noting that it's illegal for service providers to collect and process sensitive information without first implementing and maintaining a data protection program. And this means that UC companies have to take the necessary steps to ensure that they're in compliance with laws and regulations around the world. Backing up from that for just a minute, I want to frame up kind of the state of what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years. When we think about the world's largest companies, they're no longer the oil manufacturers or the aerospace companies by default. You've probably heard it said that data is the new gold. It's in the largest companies, when we think about them, they're data-driven. Microsoft, data-driven. Alphabet, data-driven. Facebook, data-driven. Even Airbnb, which doesn't even have any hotels, has reached a 75 billion valuation because it's data-driven. Uber, they don't even own any taxis, yet their data-driven model gives them a valuation of 66 billion. So all this data has really added up. I read on Statista that 97% of all the data in the history of the world has been created in the last 10 years. And that's just remarkable. But during this time, data breaches have continued to trend upward. I think partly because there's more data to breach, but also partly because of the advent of cloud service computing and cloud service providers. And it's happening at a time when cloud service providers are failing really to understand and implement the kinds of controls that are necessary to safeguard information. So in response, we see governments passing laws to protect information as they should. I mean, it's the duty and responsibility of a government to afford protection to their citizens, financial protections, healthcare protections, and now data protections, because we live our lives online and we can lose our lives online as well. So this is what we see happening, and it includes the UC industry, and it requires the UC industry to implement data protection programs that comply with applicable laws and regulations around the world.
Superb. So let's dig a little bit deeper on that. I've got my UC hat on and I'm thinking, I'm a service provider. Okay, what does this mean in practical terms? So could you kind of just talk us through that in terms of, break that down for us so we can kind of understand what role we have to play and what
Sure,
things we consider?
sure. Because a lot of people throw around the term data protection, but what does it really mean? It's an umbrella term. And under the umbrella of data protection are the terms security and privacy. I don't know if anyone's ever asked you before, if you could define the difference between security and privacy. They're related, but they're different concepts. Security is often about keeping secret things secret. I mean, it's more than that, but we'll start with that simple concept. Keeping secret things secret. It's about protecting information from loss, protecting information from unauthorized access, like call detail records or recordings of conferences or IP addresses of participants in a meeting, or it might be the UC meeting title. So we think about security, and we know that there are many different ways to secure information. You have physical securities, you can lock the buildings and lock doors and set alarms. We have technical security, such as encrypting information at rest and encrypting information that's in transit, using strong passwords. And we have administrative and organizational security, such as policies and procedures that staff have to follow. All of that is a part of security, and it feeds into a data protection program. But privacy is different. Security can be a tool that's used to achieve privacy, but privacy is so much more. And this is what a lot of people don't really understand. And it's part of a proper data protection program in today's day and age. Privacy is about the lawful basis to have that information. What lawful basis does a service provider have to keep CDR records? What lawful basis do they have to keep chat messages? How long can they keep chat messages? What rights do individuals have when you're collecting that kind of information about them? Do they have the right to know what information you have about them? Do they have the right to know with whom you've shared it? Do they have the right to know the kinds of security controls you're using to protect it? What if information is inaccurate? Do they have the right to challenge that and to have you correct it? Do they have the right to be forgotten? Do they have the right to object to certain kinds of processing? Do they have the right to object to automated decision making? So we think about privacy. It's all about the lawful basis that a UC service provider has to even hold that information, and for how long can they hold that information, which is in contrast to security, which is how do we protect that information? So when we look at security and we look at privacy together, that is what is meant by data protection. And that's why you see regulations such as the General Data Protection Regulation, bringing together those two ideas in a single regulation.
Superb. And you briefly mentioned it's unlawful not to get this right. So in terms of like GDPR and other regulations around privacy and security, I mean, there's a lot of them to consider. What is the cost of actually not getting this right? Is it, what could happen, to a business if this was not correctly addressed, for example?
That's a good question, because when we think about the cost of not getting it right, it's good to frame up a few things, because number one, I'd mentioned before that laws have made it unlawful to collect and process that information unless there is a data protection program. And so if there's a breach, if there's an investigation, if the GDPR were applicable in some way, failing to provide an attestation of compliance with the GDPR, it could result in fines of up to 20 million euros or 4% of your organization's global turnover for non-compliance. The CCPA has penalties. I think it's $7,500 per violation if you have customers in California and they're covered by the CCPA. Brazil has data protection laws with penalties. Virginia has data protection laws with penalties. So does Colorado and Connecticut and Utah and Massachusetts and New York. In fact, in the United States, every state has a data protection law, and there are 280 pending data protection bills in state legislatures. So this is a quickly changing landscape when we talk about data protection. And not complying with the laws of any land in which you have customers is a big gamble. It's a big risk, not to mention reputational risk and being tied up in investigations and potential civil action. So I would say to not implement a data protection program, the likelihood of having a breach is 100% over time, which brings about, I think we should mention a couple different metrics here. I think that would be important to know. IBM reports the average cost of a data breach to run roughly $4.6 million in their report last year. If it's a mega breach, which would be over 50 million records, the average cost of that is about 400 million. There's about 5,000 web portals that are breached every day. Ransomware attacks, we hear about them all the time. That's because 1 out of every 4 cyber attacks are actually ransomware attacks. And nobody wants to be in that position. I mean, those are the 2 worst words no CEO ever wants to hear: data breach. It's
and you can't underestimate the impact, not just the financial loss, but the reputational loss, because I suppose around the corner as well, you're going to want to do business with certain enterprise level companies that are going to want these, security. They're going to want a good security and privacy resume from you, aren't they, as a provider? So
yes.
I suppose not having this in place also prevents you maybe from accessing those types of opportunities as well. Would you agree?
Oh, I absolutely agree. That's a good way of summing it up.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, let's move on from what it's like not to get it right onto how do you get it right, and how do UC providers get started with something like a data protection program?
That's a good question. I think the first step to building a successful data protection program is you have to get the buy-in, you have to get the sponsorship from senior management, because I've seen without that, it's not going to work. So I think that's the first step. Management has to, they have a statutory duty of care, and they'll likely want to be involved, I'm sure. I think the second step when we think about this is to know what kind of data protection program you want to implement. For example, if your business is American focused, you might want to focus on SOC 2. If it's internationally focused, you might want to focus on ISO 27001. If it's government focused, you might want to be focused on NIST. If you're a cloud service provider in the UC industry, you'd want to start with ISO 27001, but then you'd want to be able to quickly do some add-ons like ISO 27017 or ISO 27018. So the second step is really determining what kind of data protection program you think is right for your business, but right for your customers as well. I think the third step is to have patience, because it takes a while to implement a data protection program. Usually a good rule of thumb is it takes a year to do this and to do it right. And then I think the fourth step I would say is to ensure you know what laws your organization has to comply with. Make a list of the laws. That's usually driven by where are your customers, where are your offices, where are your data centers, what industries do you have customers in? Do you have customers in the finance industry, the healthcare industry, the education industry? And what are your contractual requirements that you have customers giving you? So I would say that those are some of the first steps that anyone would take towards building a successful data protection program.
That's great. And I'm presuming at Allendevaux, you're going to help take that company on the journey through these various stages, because it's not just about the piece of paper at the end, is it? Of course, it's the process,
No.
the change management, and everything else that you've got to, kind of take care of
It's
along the
the
way.
change of culture, and you'll really see a shift in culture. It's kind of like driving a car. You have to think about it quite a bit at first, but later down the road, you don't have to. It's just natural. And so, yeah, we absolutely help. One of our unique things that we do is we gently make changes in an organization so it doesn't break anything, because everyone has a day job they have to do, and we help step through people through that.
That's great. Well, this has been a truly fascinating discussion so far. Not to mention, a crucial topic for our audience. But to round up, I mean, what top tips would you give our viewers, UC providers out there, to be successful in the year ahead?
I would say if you don't have a data protection program, you need to start the process of having one right away. I'd say know the laws and regulations that apply to your practice, or get help finding out what they are. I would say, ensure your organization has a formal written risk assessment. A lot of people miss that. I'd say ensure training happens with each of your departments, because it's a legal requirement. Ensure you're doing the right cybersecurity practices. You're pen testing each new rev of software that's coming out. You've got a third party providing vulnerability scans. You're conducting privacy impact assessments, PIAs. Whenever you're releasing new technology, you're doing phishing campaigns to comply with laws that require that. I'd say make sure you're performing internal audit with an independent auditor, because that's really the only way that you're going to measure compliance and effectiveness. Ensure that you're incorporating security by design and default, and privacy by design and default. If you have a DevOps organization. That's probably enough for now, Rob, but I think those are good tips, to leave with
Those are
our
good tips
audience.
to sink your teeth into. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, for anyone out there looking to connect with Allendevaux and yourself, Scott, what's the best way to get in touch?
Best way to get in touch is you can go to the website, allendevaux.com. You can just send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk to you. My email address is sallen@allendevaux.com.
That's great, and we'll put some links in the description if you're looking to connect with Scott and the team at Allendevaux. So, well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today, Scott. But it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. If you've got some good takeaways from today's session, do give us a quick mention on social and subscribe to our channel for more industry news and insights. I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.